Hello and welcome to the 5th Unity Camp lesson. So in this tutorial I'm going to be basically showing you how to create a world for your characters to reside in. So right off the bat, I've imported a few of the sprites which were in the email. You can import them just like we did before over here in the sprites folder. And these three are two backgrounds and then one just some assets that you can like walk around on, and like there's some bricks and grass. And if you haven't imported those, just do so right now into the sprites folder. Now under the pixels per unit, if you remember from before, making it higher will make them smaller, lower will make them bigger. And these were designed with 16 pixels per unit because they're 16 by 16 each individual tile is. So just set on all of these, set the pixels per unit to 16 and hit apply. And then make sure you put them all on multiple as well, as these are multiple sprites. We're not just doing one big sprite with a bunch of little assets on it. These are multiple sprites. And when I slice them, I'm not doing automatic this time because these are basically all different blocks. It's not like the players where it's just two separated sprites. So I'm going to do grid by cell size. And just like since it's 16 by 16, we'll just put those in for the X and Y on the size. We don't need any offset or padding, and then we'll slice it, and it looks pretty good. We've got the white line separating all the sprites, and then just hit apply. And you can see that all the sprites every tile is separated now. We'll do the same thing on these 16 by 16. So apply that. And make sure to pixels per unit as 16, apply those, and then we will slice them up. And now basically you want to add a palette where we can put all the tiles on, so we can simply just paint them on. So I'm going to the window and clicking on tile palette, and you can drag it to wherever you want. So you can pretty much put it on anywhere on the screen, just like the other tools. I usually like to have it sort of on the bottom, kind of next to my my assets. And right now it looks pretty barren, but that's because we don't really have anything in it right now. So let's do that. And I'm just going to get rid of these game objects because we don't need them right now. I'm also turning off the player and enemy just so we can really focus on the grid itself. Alright, now that those are turned off, we're going to right click, and instead of hitting create empty, we're actually going to go to 2D object, and we're going to hit the tile map option. And as you can see, that creates a grid, which is pretty self-explanatory, just a 2D grid as the various, it's sort of like Battleship almost, different positions that you can place things. I'm going to rename this to my tile map grid, just so it's a bit more descriptive. And then underneath, we have a child object, which is basically an object within an object, and this is called tile map. And as you can see over here in the tile palette, we now can set our active tile map as tile map. So I'm changing the name right now to background because in my mind I'm thinking, well, we need a background and we need a foreground. That's a pretty good place to start. So then hit the or click on the tile map grid and then just go to a 2D object and make another tile map. It'll just create another child. And now we can set it as this one as well. And you can probably guess what we're going to call it. We called the other one background, so this one will be foreground. Alright, so now you can basically choose which tile map we want to edit. But we still don't have anything in our palettes. In fact, we don't even have a palette set up yet. So in order to do that, first off, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm just putting it inside my sprites, and I'm going to call it tiles, just so we have a place to put the tiles once we add them to the palette. This might not make sense right now. It'll make sense in a second once I create a new palette. And I'm just going to call this one a tile palette. And now when you hit the create button, it's going to ask where you want to put it. I'm just going to put it in that tiles folder I just created, just so it's nice and organized. And then I'm going to drag one of the, I've got the 3 different tile sets here. I'll drag one in. It's going to prompt where do you want to put it. Just like before, I'm going to put it in the tiles folder. So let's choose that and import it. Alright, and now we can see that the tiles are currently in Unity. They're a bit blurry though, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, if you remember from the player, put it on no filter, and then the compression I'm going to put as none. And that basically will just get rid of the blurriness and just say, okay, we want it to look a lot sharper. And I'm actually going to do the same on the other tile sets as well before I add them in, so I don't forget about it. And so yeah. So I've cut forward a bit, I've dragged these in and they've loaded up, just put them in the tiles folder, and you can see in the tile folder we have every individual tile that we've put into it. Now we're never really going to use the tile folder, it's more of just a means of storing them. So if we were to basically just go over to the tile map grid now, we can take one of the tiles, and there's a paintbrush tool selected, and we can just paint it on. And we can pretty much just have some fun with that. So currently we're on the background layer. Now if you drag multiple tiles, then you can do that and then keep painting with that many at a time. Or an even better way is using this square tool. I forget the exact name of it. And then you can click and then drag it over to try to fit your scene. And this won't always work exactly, but it's typically a good way if you're using very simple sprites like we are. And here we have the eraser tool. You can set how big you want it to be by clicking on the tiles, and you can just erase. Pretty self-explanatory. So if we paint a couple, and then you can use this to just select them, you can check the settings and stuff, and this arrow tool can move them around. Okay, so let's go ahead and erase these. And I'm just going to create a basic background. I'm going to use the rock texture here, just to show the other one off. Use the square tool, and then drag it over, and that looks pretty good. And all these textures, or all the sprites were made by Jimmy, who made the shadowy figure character. So big shout out to him. And you can also change the size of your camera, so you can make it bigger, smaller, whatever you feel fits your game based on the tiles, but I'd say that works pretty well. You can also resize the tiles, but I've always just found it better to just change the camera size. And then currently we're on the background layer, but if we want to put things in the front, then obviously we'd have to go to the foreground layer. And you notice that we're putting things down, and we can't really see them. They seem to be behind the background. So if we go ahead and check by turning the background off, yeah, they're there, but they're behind. And that's due to the sorting layer that they're in. And sorting layer and layer are different things, because sorting layer is basically where it'll appear when you see it. So if I click here, we've used tags before, and we've used layers, but now we're going to use the sorting layer, which is the final one of the three. So we'll make a layer and call it background. We'll create another one and call this one foreground. You can probably guess that we've got background and foreground, which makes sense. But then the third one, we need our player and enemy to be somewhere. So we'll just put them on the characters layer. And the lower the layer is in this little chart, the higher up it'll be, which can be a bit confusing if you're used to like photo editing programs, where typically it's the layer on top that's the highest layer. But in Unity, it's the bottom one. So we're going to have our characters on top of the foreground, which will be on top of the background, which I'd say makes sense for a simple 2D game. So now if you go to the background, then you will see the little option here under the tile map renderer, and you can set the sorting layer to background, and I'm going to do the same with foreground and the foreground layer. And I'm actually going to go ahead as well, now that I think about it, and just change the layer for player under sprite renderer. We can select the characters layer and apply that to the prefab. And I'll do the same thing for the enemy as well. Go to the sprite renderer and make it the characters and apply that. Okay, so now it's time that you can basically create your foreground if you haven't already, and feel free to do whatever you want. I'm just going to do a little time lapse and create mine. But while I'm doing that, feel free to get creative. You can put in any like little pit traps. You can place enemies if you want to, which I'm going to do a bit later, I think. But really just try to make it your own. If you want to import your own tools and try to create some more elaborate looking stuff with that, then by all means go ahead. The idea I have behind this is that the player will start on the left side. They'll have to jump over a little pit here and then get to the right side over here over the little hill. So I know it's very, very simple, but it's good for demonstration purposes. So I need to actually add a collider to the foreground. So I'm going to add a tile map collider because this is a tile map. So there's going to be the tile map collider 2D. And as you can see, we have little colliders over every single tile now. So now, it just like the any other object, it'll have a hitbox, so the player could walk on it, or touch it, or interact, or anything like that. Now, there is an option here used by composite, which is going to give a little yellow error if you press it. And in order to make that work, we're going to add a composite collider 2D, which will also add a rigid body. Now, if you hit use by composite, it will allow you to basically have one hitbox or one thing for anything connected. So as you can see, the green line is kind of over all of it at the moment. So it's not every individual tile, it's basically one big tile, which I tend to prefer. Really, it's up to you if you want to just keep it as every individual one, but this one I've always felt just looks a little bit nicer. And let's set the layer as ground as well, so we know what it is. Now if we put our player back in the game, so there they are. We'll put them on the left side, and let's see if they can do it. They can complete the level. Oh, it's falling, it looks like. And the reason is that currently the rigid body is at dynamic. And so I'm going to set it, instead of dynamic, to static, so it doesn't move. Now let's hit play. Alright, we can move. Still we're kind of slow based on the run speed we used earlier. I don't think we can make this pit. Nope, we cannot jump over it in time. Alright, so we're going to have to adjust, at least I am. You can do whatever feels right for you, but I think I'm going to adjust probably the run speed of my player. I think the jumping is fine, but let's change the run speed. Let's put it up a bit, maybe to a 4. Alright, can we make it now? Almost? Nope, not quite. I bet we probably could, but we're going to make it a bit easier at a 4.3 maybe. And I bet this is probably going to feel like yeah, I think that's a good speed for this size level. But as you can see, we're kind of getting stuck on this little object here. And that can confuse a lot of people, like why is the player stopping? And that's because of something called friction. And so there's friction that's kind of making the player stick to the wall as they jump up. And we're basically going to have to create a way of putting no friction, or at least no friction between the collisions between the player and the ground. So under player, you'll see under the colliders, there's going to be a thing called material. There's also a material under the rigid body, but let's focus on the colliders for now. If you hit the dot, then it gives these 3 options: the bouncy box, slippery, and sticky. Those aren't really what we want though, because we want to add basically we're going to create a physics material that says no friction, so that way you're not getting caught on things. So under assets, I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this materials. I believe in this course, I'm pretty sure this is the only material we're going to be making, but it's good just to have it there for just to keep things nice and organized. And then go to create, and you're going to see physics material 2D. And then over on the side, there's the friction and bounciness. We don't need any bounciness. This isn't a trampoline or anything. But go ahead and change the friction from, I think that's a 0.4. We'll change that to 0. So that way there is no friction. And let's go ahead and rename this just to keep it, just to give it a meaningful title. And we will call this no friction. Now under the player, under the colliders, I'm going to go ahead and select no friction for these, just so we have some good physics with not getting stuck to any walls. Apply that to the prefab. I'm also going to go ahead and add it to the composite collider of the foreground, just to be extra safe here. And I believe, let's do it for the enemy as well. I don't know if this would really make a difference because we're not controlling or making the enemy jump, But it's better safe than sorry, so it can't hurt anything, and we will apply that. Now, if we hit play on our game, we shouldn't be getting stuck on a wall anymore. So we can move around, we can jump, and I fell there. Let's pretend that didn't happen. And if we jump, oh, there we go. Looks like we can make it perfectly fine. But you might notice in a sec that there's probably going to be another issue we will interfere, and that is the collision detection isn't quite right. As you can see, we kind of got stuck in the floor. I'll zoom in a bit. And after that big drop, it seems that our feet have been stuck and we can no longer jump out. And why this is, I made a mistake earlier. I've cut the video forward to be like, what did I do? So if we go under the foreground, then under the rigid body, I had said to set it to static before. That was a big mistake on my end. You're going to want to make it kinematic. And the reason you're going to want to make it kinematic and not static is that under kinematic, there's two types of collision detection. There's continuous and discrete. So discrete basically means it'll turn the collision on when something collides with it. Continuous means it's always on. So basically the problem we were having is that when something's static, it only ever has discrete collision detection. And we want to make it so it's always checking the collision detection. So that's why instead of static, we need it to be kinematic with continuous. Because if it's discrete and it's only checking collision when something collides, then sometimes, like we had before, it's going to cause a couple errors with, okay, it checked, but by that point it checked, we were already in the floor and now we're stuck. So make sure that's on kinematic and the collision detection is continuous. And that should fix the issue. Yep, as you can see, we do a big drop and we're no longer getting stuck in the floor, so excellent. That fixed that. But now we haven't really done any coding yet this lesson, and there's one thing I would like to add, which is we have that pit there, which I fell down earlier, but nothing really happened. So how about we make it so when the player falls down the pit, the level will restart, like if you hit an enemy and died. Sort of like a player death, like when you hit the enemy, then the level will restart. We'll do the same thing for the pit. So under scripts, I'm going to create a new script for the bottomless pit. Let's just go ahead and call it bottomless pit. I don't really know any better phrase for what that is. And now I'm going to create an empty game object because just like with anything else, we have to create a collider. So we know when the player hits the bottomless pit, then we have to do the action. So I'll reset the transform on this object and create a box collider 2D. And then I'm just going to roughly drag it over the pit and edit the collider so the player will fall down and hit it. So I'd say that looks pretty good. It's off the world, so we actually see the player kind of falling down. And then I'm going to go ahead and just drag our script into it. Alright, so now if we go to the bottomless pit script in Visual Studio, we can start to edit this. Now it's going to be a very simple script. If you remember before from the it was the player script, we are editing the scene management, so we can basically restart the scene. And we're going to do pretty much the same thing here. So using Unity Engine.scene management. And you can actually, a little challenge if you want. I think you may know how to do this from one of the last lessons. You can basically, when the player touches it, then you reset the level. But if not, I'm going to go through it in a sec. So we're going to create a box collider 2D, and this is going to be our only collider, so I'm just going to call this one My Collider. We don't really need to be extra specific with it, because we're not going to be creating more. And My Collider equals get component, box collider 2D. You've probably done this like a lot, at least like 20 times at this point, so it should start to become second nature. And then we'll create a function, and I'll call this void. What should we name it? I'm just going to call it restart level. I think that's a pretty accurate name to basically what we're doing. And we want to say that if a player is touching the box collider, or basically if my collider is touching a player, or basically the layer player. So if my collider dot is touching layers, and you want to type layer mask, like we've been doing before, dot get mask, and then in parentheses, in quotes, we type player, because that's the name of our layer. then the effect will be that we want to reset the level. So you remember back from player, we made a command last lesson, I believe it was, to restart the level. So we can literally, if you want to be lazy, like I'm going to be, because there's no point in writing that all out again, just copy it, and I'm just going to paste it in here. Alright, so, and then let's just add the restart level to update, so it'll actually call it. Save that up, and then it should be working fine. So go back into Unity, and let's test this out. Alright, seems to be working A-okay. And if you don't want any pits in your game, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to do that if that's not really your cup of tea. And I'm going to go ahead and name this game object the bottomless pit. And I'm going to prefab it in case we want to use a bottomless pit later. Alright, so that object is now prefabbed. And I'm going to go ahead and delete the old game objects, these ugly little platforms we had, because we don't need them anymore. We've got something, courtesy of Jimmy, something a lot prettier. And I'm just going to place the enemy somewhere into the game. And if I'm going, like, if I'm not really describing what I'm doing, it's kind of just because I think you can really get creative with this and make something your own. You don't need to just follow what I'm doing this lesson. But I will create a way to get to the next level. So I'm creating a game object called next level. Just like with the bottomless pit, I'll add a box collider. And I kind of want so the player will touch the end and get to the next level. So let's sort of make it so that fits in there. Alright, looks pretty good. Under scripts, we will add a new script, and we'll just call this the next level. So if we type that in here. Alright, if we open that up, this is going to be a very similar script to the one we just did. Only difference is we want to say that when it touches the player, we go to the next level and not restart the current one. So I'm just going to copy and paste all of this in, because we just have to edit it a bit. And now it's going to give these errors, and that's basically because we're saying public class bottomless pit up at the top next to mono behavior. And that's basically just saying, what is this? And it's realizing, hey, that doesn't match the name of our script. So if we go ahead and change it from bottomless pit to next level, then we no longer get those errors. And now we just have to, right now we say that we want to build the current index, and to build the next level, we have to do the exact same command, but instead of just building this one, we say +1 for one scene more. And you may be wondering, how does it know which scenes are which? And that's going to be the last thing we do in a minute now. Let's just test this to make sure it works. Alright, we got the enemy walking, we can kill that. Then if we get to the end, okay, nothing, it's not saying anything. I know why this is. We didn't add the script to the object. So let's go ahead and do that. Just take the, I'll just hit add component, and we'll search for next level, and just add the script. Now let's try this out. Alright, jump on, we can just jump over the enemy. And then if we go to console, it's going to give us this error, and that's what we're looking for right now, saying you want to start the next level, but there is none. There's no next scene. So if we go ahead, let's rename the sample scene to level 1, and we can create a new scene, and we'll just call this level 2. Then if you try to open that up, it'll ask, do you want to save the current scene? So just go ahead and do that. And then in level 2, we just have our main camera, and we should actually go ahead and prefab the tile map grid. And we're not going to do the same exact structure in level 2. Please edit it and make it unique and make it however you want it to look. But for the moment, just for demonstration purposes, I'd say I'm just going to drag in that second level tile map, and now we have our level 2. So the last thing we need to do in this lesson is basically tell Unity this is what's going to come after the past level. And the way we can do that is if we go to edit, or not edit, my bad, file, and go to the build settings, then up here you'll see the scenes in build. And now if you hit the add open scenes, it'll now add the level 2. So if we go back to the first scene, the level 1, we can add that as well. So file, build settings, add open scene. And now I'm going to drag level 1 before level 2. You can see on the side it has the numbers. So it starts with 0 and then goes up from there. So we have level 1, then level 2. Now if we start the game, we're starting on level 1, jump over the enemy, and now we are on level 2, as you can see right here. So there is no player yet or anything to do in level 2, but I'd say that's a good place to stop for today. By all means, make the level however you want, get creative with the tools. You could import your own if you want, or just use these. And I hope you join us for the next and I believe final lesson where we're going to have a full playable game. So hope to see you next time.